just focused on Institute of Cost and Accountants of India material, because I know for sure entire paper is going to be crafted from that particular material. You also, as a CMA students, should focus on CMA Institute study material to as far as possible, to as much as possible in all the subjects which you are taking coaching of, all the subjects which you are not taking coaching of or doing self. Please focus on the Institute study material very well. I have in my entire book have focused particularly on Institute of Cost Accountants of India study material only, and I've taken some past examination questions, some more practice questions from the RTPs, MTPs, and I've focused exclusively on CMA final syllabus, because I know that entire examination is going to come from this particular study material only. Therefore, my book is inspired from the Institute study material, so you need not look at any other reference material, any other book for studying direct taxation. The book which has been supplied to you, the notes which have been supplied to you in my classes, they are more than sufficient. If you do those thrice, and if you just give me tests which are scheduled for you in the WhatsApp group. Oh, what are you saying? You're not in the WhatsApp group? Please call up my team at 9643929913 and add yourself in the WhatsApp group. Weekly tests are happening on direct taxation in that WhatsApp group. So just get yourself added in that WhatsApp group, and you will be privy to the test series, the discussions which we have on a normal basis, the assignments which I give for taxation on a regular basis. You will be privy to all those information through those WhatsApp groups. Vanakkam, namaskara and namaskar. Welcome to this session of the direct taxation. So yes, we are going to start 100 marks paper of your syllabus, CMA final group 3 direct taxation. Needless to say, one of the lengthiest subjects of your syllabus, direct taxation. Undoubtedly, you have already encountered direct taxation in your intermediate, and you have done a big quite a lot chunk of income taxation you have already studied. But yes, now we will build upon your concepts from the inter to the final, and we will go to the next level of concepts and all the concepts which you have studied in your intermediate class. Sir, let us tell you one thing very, very frankly before you start teaching us the subject. Sir, we seldom remember any concept of intermediate, because it has been a while since we have given our intermediate examination. Definitely, I understand that. Do not worry. I will teach all the concepts starting from the base, starting from the scratch till the level which is required in CMA final. So even if you have not been able to remember all the concepts well of intermediate, nothing to worry about. We will first of all do all the basic concept clarifications and all the concept clarity whichever you required for your intermediate. We'll do all those things, and then we'll build upon your CMA final syllabus. But before we get on to our syllabus, I need to talk some basic stuff with all of you. I need to talk the relevance of the subject with you. Before delving into the subject, it is really important for all of you to know whether this subject is of any use to you in your future, in your career, in your professional pursuit as a CMA. Okay. So I'll ask you a very basic question. Question is, what do you mean by CMA? What is CMA? Sir, are you kidding with us? So this is our heart and soul. This is the thing which we are working for day and night. How could we not know what is CMA? Of course. So what is the full form? So the full form is Cost and Management Accountant. Absolutely. So the two relevant words which are there in this abbreviation is cost and management. Cost accountants primarily deal with costing. Costing is our forte. How to compute cost of a particular product, how to compute cost of a particular service, what is the profit margin which we are going to earn while we sell this particular product or this particular service. This is our core area of study. So yes, costing is the area which we are made for. Costing is the area which we are going to use for almost all the time when we are in our professional journey, in our professional world, in our corporate job. Whenever we are over there, costing is the primary thing which we are going to look at. So what is the relevance of direct tax? Guys, frankly speaking, there is no relevance of direct tax in your professional life. Yes, I'll be honest with you. I'll be absolutely truthful with you. I don't want to keep you in some dilemma or in some misconception. I want to clear all your misconceptions before we start on to the subject. Before we get on to the subject, of course, yes, it is a mandatory subject of 100 marks in your syllabus. So you need to score well. You need to pass this subject to attain good rank. If you are aiming for a rank, and if you are aiming for qualifying your CMA, undoubtedly you have to pass this subject. So you have to study this subject and clear it, irrespective of the fact whether it is relevant for your future or not, irrespective of the fact whether it will be utilized in your future or not. But the harsh truth is, this subject is of very less importance in our practical life. We as cost accountants do not deal with direct taxation ever in our professional careers because we are dedicated to costing. Costing is our forte. So costing is the area where we'll be working upon, and direct taxation will be of no use to all the CMAs or all the prospective CMAs whom I'm talking to as of now. So sir, why has institute forcibly put 100 marks paper in our subject? We could have done away with this subject. In either case, sir, we didn't like studying direct taxation under intermediate, salary, house property, PGBP, other sources. It was so taxing. It was so difficult. It was so cumbersome to learn all those provisions. It was so difficult. So why don't we do away with this particular subject? Why has institute kept it if it's of so insignificance to our professional career? Guys, the reality is, whatever I have spoken for last 2-3 minutes is absolutely incorrect, is absolutely baseless. But I know many of you sit in a direct taxation class with this notion in their mind: we just need to qualify our CMA and then we are not going to touch direct taxation ever in our life. No, direct taxation is not our area of interest. We are not going to study direct taxation ever in our life. We don't want to touch Income Tax Act ever in our life. We are cost accountants. We'll be good with costing. We'll be good with accountancy, but not direct taxation. We just need to qualify our examination. We don't just need to pass. That's why we are studying this subject. Otherwise, we will not touch this particular subject ever in our life. Many of you are under this misconception that cost accountants do not actively involve in direct taxation area. Guys, this is a big misconception. Of course, yes, you need to qualify this particular examination, this particular paper for your examination perspective, from a perspective of becoming a CMA or obtaining a rank. You need to score well in this particular paper. Apart from that, this particular subject for a finance professional, which you are going to be in the future, is a pivotal element of your day-to-day routine. Any costing decision, any decision relating to relevance of a particular cost cannot be complete without computing the tax cost which is involved in that particular transaction. And tax cost can be huge. You would say, sir, what huge? Tax cost is barely 30% of our total taxable profit. No, it's not 30%. Remember, there are interests, there are penalties, there are several other ramifications which come along with direct taxation if you do not follow it properly. So there have been instances in history of India, and not 50 years back or 20 years back. No. Recently, there have been instances in recent past where many companies had to shut down their operations in India just because of tax. Many companies I have encountered in my professional career. So I have been associated with the big fours in their direct taxation division, in the corporate taxation division, advisory division, litigation of taxation division for past 10 years. And I have seen companies taking a decision that we don't want to venture into India because their taxation regime is too harsh and it's a little uncertain. I have seen many multinationals come up to this particular conclusion. Similarly, when you will be the finance head of a particular company, you will be into the financing operations of a particular company, you will be into the hardcore compliance team of a particular company, direct taxation will be one of the essential elements to decide whether to go forward with this particular proposition or not, whether to go forward with this particular product or not. It will be a tough call for you to decide whether the direct taxation regime will be in your favor or will it be against you while computing profitability of a particular venture. So, not only from the perspective of your examination, but direct taxation is important from the perspective of your professional life as a finance professional. So my earnest endeavor, my earnest request to all of you is, do not ignore this particular subject. Love this subject, like this subject, develop a liking for this subject, and then not only will you score good marks in your examination, but you will be successful as a finance professional. Sir, how can we develop a liking for this particular subject? How can we, as you say, love this particular subject? So the best way to like a particular subject or to love a particular subject is not only to study theoretically, but also to study it or also to understand it practically. What happens on the practical ground? What happens when a taxation a case is being heard before a High Court, Supreme Court, Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, CIT appeals? What happens in those forums when you are deciding a particular case or giving your arguments before the court? What happens practically to the notices? What happens practically to the sections? All these practical applicability of the sections are equally important for you to understand and to like this particular subject. And I will be playing an important role in not only teaching you this subject theoretically, but also to give you some practical insights out of my experience of over 10 years of working in the taxation department of the Big Fours. I'll share all my experiences with you during this particular class, during these particular lectures, and in each of the concept, each of the section, definitely I'll be attaching some practical oversight, some practical element to it, so that you not only understand this particular subject theoretically, but also understand it practically, and also love this subject, like this subject. At the end of these lectures, my goal is to develop that feeling in you that you say, sir, we not only want to qualify our CMA final examination with flying colors in direct taxation, but also we want to be a direct tax professional, a direct tax consultant in our professional life. We love this subject so much. My target for all of you is that. With that positive note, let's start our 100-mark subject, CMA final, Group 3, direct taxation. Okay, so direct taxation primarily for our CMA final consists of two elements: domestic taxation and international taxation. Guys, in your intermediate class, you have studied only domestic taxation. You have not studied international taxation. So domestic taxation is old for you, is known, a little bit known for you, but international taxation is an unknown devil. We don't know what is it. So this is an important element of your subject, of your syllabus. And let me tell you, from a practical standpoint, from a professional standpoint, international taxation is the future of taxation of any country. Because there are multinational companies which are working in different countries, which are cross-border selling their products, cross-border selling their services, which are opening their offices in different countries, which are using tax concessions of different countries to reap benefits. They're doing several things. So international taxation is the future of taxation in at least India. So this particular section, although contains only 25 to 30 marks of your syllabus in your examination, but in your practical life, this will be a very important element to learn. So yes, I will definitely teach you some tactics of understanding international taxation in a very, very lucid way, in a very, very simple way. And this area will be dealt with in a little detail than what is required by me, just because I want you to learn international taxation not only theoretically but also practically. So yes, this is an important area of your syllabus, 25 to 30 marks. Domestic taxation, which all of you know, consists of Income Tax Act 1961, Income Tax Rules 1962. So these are the two primary aspects of income taxation, domestic taxation in our country. The law which was created in 1961, the law which was created in 1962. These are the two important limbs of your domestic taxation in India. My question to you, please hear to my question. Sir, Income Tax Act 1961, which means that Income Tax Act was formed in somewhere in 1960 and it was effective from 1961. Absolutely. So sir, prior to 1961, is it that Income Tax Act was non-existent? Prior to 1961, whatever income you used to earn, it was absolutely tax free. There was no taxation regime in the country prior to 1961. Is it so? The answer is no, it isn't so. Before 1961, there was Income Tax Act 1922. Before independence, there was an act which was enacted. Now, why was that act repealed? Why was that act overwritten? The reason why that act was overwritten was that it was based on British law. It was based on the provisions which were there in British law. Therefore, those provisions were to be modulated. Those provisions were to be carved out to make it susceptible to make it suitable to the Indian requirements. Therefore, 1922 Act was scrapped off and 1961 Act was replaced, and 1961 Act, as amended every year since then, is the current Income Tax Act which is in front of us. Income Tax Act 1961 accompanied with income tax rules. Now, so what is the need of creating these two separate books? And you might have seen Income Tax Act, it is this thick. Income tax rules is also this thick. So what is the need of creating two separate limbs of a particular law? What is the relevance of creating rules along with the act? Now, let me tell you a very useful insight on creation of rules. Okay, so income tax, or for that matter, any act, any law which is there in the country, consists of rules and the basic act. The basic act contains the provision of the law, which tells you that what are the provisions of the law, what are the things that you need to follow, what are the compliances that you need to make. They will tell you the basic principles. But rules will tell you how are you going to follow the law. What are the steps that you are going to follow a particular law? How are you going to follow a law? What are the forms that I need to fill? So all the procedural aspects of the income tax, all the procedures related to income tax are enumerated in the income tax rules. So Act contains the basic provisions, and rules contains the procedure, how to implement those basic provisions. That is the difference between Income Tax Act and Income Tax rules. So repeat, Income Tax Act contains the basic provisions, what is to be done. Income Tax Act rules contains the procedural provision, how is it to be done. So for example, on a Sunday evening, it is raining heavily, and you get a feeling of eating something spicy. You ask your mother, Mom, I want to eat something spicy. That is the act, that is the law. You want to do something. What do you want to do? I want to eat something spicy. That is the act. Now your mother is thinking, what should I make? How should I make it? Do I have the necessary ingredients to make it? What are the necessary ingredients required to make it? Do I need to fetch something from the market? If yes, then what will it be? How much time will it take? So all the procedural aspects of what is to be done are dealt with in income tax rules. So Income Tax Act, the basic provisions. The basic provisions. What is to be done? How compliances are to be done. I mean, how that particular thing will materialize. What an assessee needs to do for complying with the act. The basic provisions are contained in the act. And the procedural aspects of the basic concepts, how the procedure needs to be followed, what are the steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, what are the steps, they are given in the rules. So that is how Income Tax Act and Income Tax rules work. This is the same procedure which is worked in even Companies Act. The same procedure applies. Even in the any other act which you talk about, same procedure applies. So yes, we are definitely going to study Income Tax Act in its in-depth way. How many sections are there in Income Tax Act? Approximately 300 sections are there in Income Tax Act, and yes, we are going to deal with almost all of them. So we are going to learn 300 sections. So we need to mug up all the 300 sections. No, don't worry. You don't need to mug up 300 sections. So section quoting is yes preferable, but it is practically and humanly not possible to learn all the sections. But yes, we are going to remember, or we are going to at least try to remember certain important provisions of our syllabus. Might not be all, but certain important provisions of our syllabus we will be trying to learn. Okay, sir. So that's all about domestic taxation. We are going to study domestic taxation. About 70 to 75 marks will be dedicated to domestic taxation. Coming on to international taxation, 25 to 30 marks. Again, International taxation contains three things: Income Tax Act 1961, Income Tax Act 1962, and double taxation avoidance agreements. In short form, they are known as DTAA, or they are also known as treaty. DTAA or treaty. Sir, first things first. Sir, you told us that Income Tax Act and rules are an essential ingredient of domestic taxation. Then why are you deriving Income Tax Act and Income Tax rules provisions in international taxation? Why are you doing that? You told us that Income Tax Act and rules are a part of domestic taxation. Then how can they be part of international taxation as well? Okay, the answer to this question is, if you want to go to the double taxation avoidance agreements, which deals with international taxation, if you want to go there, you need to take the route via the Income Tax Act. Income Tax Act will tell you in what circumstances should you go to the double taxation avoidance agreements. So Income Tax Act contains those provisions which will tell you that how to use double taxation agreement, where when to go to double taxation agreement, how to utilize double taxation agreement. Income Tax Act will itself tell you. Therefore, if you want to go to the double taxation avoidance agreement, which are the treaty, which are the basic ingredients of our international taxation, you have to go via the Income Tax Act. Plus, there are certain provisions which are related to transfer pricing, which are given in Income Tax Act, which again relates to international taxation. Therefore, international taxation or domestic taxation, Income Tax Act is the basic, is the mother law, is the Bhagavad Gita of taxation. Whether it's Income Tax Act or whether it's international tax or it's domestic tax, Income Tax Act will form the basic. And then it will go to this weird looking difficult to spell thing which we don't know, sir. We have never heard of this thing. This is very new for us. Double taxation avoidance agreement, treaty, DTA. We don't know, sir, what is this. Don't worry. Even if you don't know what is it, we'll in our lecture deal with it in a detailed manner. You won't have any problems in understanding what DTA is after we complete the international taxation part of our syllabus. Okay, so sir, we got the overview. We are now very clear about the two parts of our direct taxation syllabus. So sir, now we are really excited to start studying one of the elements. So which element are you going to start today? Which element are we going to study today? Guys, we are going to study international taxation today. International taxation is the topic which we are going to start. Sir, but don't you think that international taxation, before studying international taxation, we should have some basic idea about domestic taxation also? Guys, there is no problem in starting with international taxation without starting domestic taxation. I will help you out at every stage. Wherever domestic taxation provisions are required, I will reiterate them. Wherever those provisions are required, I will tell you. But those provisions are required in a very short and small and crisp manner. So they are not required in detail. So no, don't have this notion in mind. So we are starting international taxation, but we have not started domestic. That's not a problem. We can directly go to international taxation. We need not study domestic taxation to understand international taxation. Therefore, don't worry, we'll start with international taxation and you will face no problem at all. There is no hard and fast rule that yes, we first have to start domestic taxation, then we have to go on to international taxation. So today I'm eagerly waiting to start international taxation with all of you. Okay, so as the name itself suggests, international transaction. International transaction means, this word international means multiple countries are involved in this particular kind of transactions. In this taxation, multiple countries are involved. International means international. Multiple nations are involved. Multiple countries are involved in this particular taxation, which is known as international taxation. Now, as a sovereign country, India, we need to devise two kinds of law. Law which is applicable to our residents, our citizens. Law which is applicable to foreign citizens or foreign nationals. So, but why? Why do we need to create two different laws? For one for ourselves, one for the person who's staying outside or who's not a resident of India or who's working from outside. Why do we need to create two laws in this particular scenario? Why are two laws required? Why are we looking at them as separate people? Why don't we look at them as our people only? Why we should not have a uniform code? Why shouldn't we have a uniform taxation law for all the people, whether they are working in India, whether they are working outside India, whether they are outsiders coming into India and working? Why this double taxation principle there, sir? Why two taxation are required? One is international taxation, one is domestic taxation. Why can't we have consistency? I'll give you an example to answer your question. These are two countries, India and US. India is a sovereign country located in Asia. US is a country which is located so America contains US, and America is divided into two parts, North America and South America. So India, US are the two countries which we are talking about. I have a person. His name is Raju. Raju is the owner of fastest growing South Indian cuisine. And by the way, let me tell you, South Indian is my favorite cuisine. Yes. So whenever I go out, South Indian food is my favorite, and I always venture into South Indian restaurants. And whenever I go to South, I usually visit Bangalore a lot. Over there, there are some South Indian food chains like Dwarka, which I really love, and I always hog on to the food which are served by South Indian restaurants. And yes, Mr. Raju is owner of one of the leading South Indian restaurants. The name of the restaurant is Sarvana Bhavan. Sarvana Bhavan is owned by Raju. It's a leading chain of South Indian cuisine, South Indian restaurants serving the entire nation. So Sarvana Bhavan has multiple outlets in many parts of the country. It has outlet in Mumbai, it has outlet in Chennai, it has outlet in Delhi, it has outlet in Himachal Pradesh, it has outlet in UP, it has outlet in MP. In each of the states, there is a outlet of Sarvana Bhavan. Raju is a rich man. All his outlets are doing really well. This is a profitable venture. It's a cash cow. They are cash rich company. This is a cash rich company. They are earning huge profits by this food chain which is known as Sarvana Bhavan. And this food chain is working pan-India. Now, as far as income tax is concerned, in pan-India, there is only one authority which levies income tax, which is the Income Tax Act 1961, which is administered by the central government. Central government administers this act known as the Income Tax Act. So in the entire country, the whole and sole responsibility of collecting taxes is vested with only one person. What is name of that person? The Income Tax Department, which is controlled by one person, central government, through an act known as Income Tax Act 1961 along with the rules. So, wherever a profit is being earned, the entire profit taken together will be taxed in a singular manner. Where? Under the Income Tax Act 1961. The entire profit will be taxed in a singular manner by the single person who is the central government through Income Tax Act 1961. Now, I'll give you a hypothetical situation. Now understand the hypothetical situation. Now this is absolutely hypothetical. It has nothing to do with anyone real or live. This has never happened in India. It will never happen in future also in India. I am giving you a hypothetical situation. Assume that Delhi outlet, the Income Tax Act is scrapped in near future. It is scrapped, and the Delhi government is required to prepare its Income Tax Act. So Delhi government prepared its Income Tax Act by the name of Delhi Income Tax Act. Mumbai government prepared its act by the name of Mumbai Income Tax Act. MP government creates its income tax act by the name of MP Income Tax Act. UP government will create its income tax act by the name of UP Income Tax Act, and Chennai government will create an income tax by the name of Chennai Income Tax Act. Every state is authorized. In future, government passes a rule that every government is authorized to create their own income tax act, and they are free to charge income tax for their particular territories. There is no one ruling authority who's going to do this function. This function is to be performed by each and every state separately. Now, there will be a tussle. There will be a fight. Suppose a person who's staying in Madhya Pradesh gets a masala dosa packed. Okay? A person who's staying in Madhya Pradesh gets a masala dosa packed. He's traveling from Madhya Pradesh to UP. Soon as he comes to UP, the dosa which he packed, he consumes that dosa in UP. Now the question is, which state should levy tax on this particular dosa? Should it be the Madhya Pradesh government who has created or manufactured the product? Or should it be the UP government where the product is being consumed? There can be one other example. There can be another example. Okay, I'll give you another example. A person from Delhi, Saravana Bhavan, there's a outlet in Saravana Bhavan, Delhi. The outlet in Saravana Bhavan, Delhi produces, say, 100 dosas, and they deliver this dosa to Haryana or UP. They deliver this 100 dosas. There is a function in Haryana or UP. They pack these dosas and deliver it to Haryana. So the sale actually happens in Haryana. The manufacturing happened in Delhi. Manufacturing of dosa happened in Delhi. Sale of dosa happened in Haryana or UP, Uttar Pradesh. Now you will tell me that, sir, if you make dosa and you pack it, then it will go bad. It will become soft. It will not be worth eating. I mean, dosa is only eaten when it's made freshly. I mean, it's hot. Then only it's tasty. Otherwise, it will lose its taste. It will be very soggy. It won't be good. That's okay. I am not offering you any dosa to eat right now. Neither am I actually planning to open a food chain which will supply dosa interstate. We are just giving a hypothetical example. This is just a hypothetical example. So don't be emotional about it. I know even I am emotional about dosas. My dosa has to be crispy and it has to be hot, but that's okay. I am producing dosa in Delhi, selling it at Haryana or UP. There's an interstate sale. Now in this case, government of Delhi will say, oh, the dosa was manufactured at my premises. In Delhi, dosa was manufactured. So the Income Tax Act should be levied in Delhi. What will Haryana government say? Haryana government say, so what if the dosa was produced in Delhi? So what? It was sold in Haryana. So Haryana government should take the taxes, should take the income tax of the dosa sold in Haryana. Or the UP government will say, no, dosa was sold in UP, so the tax should be levied at UP. Similarly, on consumption basis, where was the dosa consumed? Some governments can claim income tax act should be levied in the area where the dosa was consumed. So, crux of the matter is, if you split taxing rights within India, within different state governments, then there will be a tussle. There will be a fight. Everyone would want to take their share of income tax act. Everyone will want to tax that particular transaction in their particular state so that they get their pie of revenue. Everyone will fight for their revenue. Just because the income tax is a center matter today, this is not the scenario where states are given right to levy income tax. Income tax is levied by the central government, so there's no dispute. Whether dosa is produced in Delhi or produced in Haryana, consumed in Haryana, supplied to Faridabad, consumed in UP, doesn't matter. Entire country is one as far as Income Tax Act is concerned. Therefore, there is no dispute in this matter that who will levy tax. Who will levy tax? There's no dispute. So, there is no problem. But problem will arise if I split the taxing rights. I'll give you an example internationally now. I've given you a domestic example now. Now let's come on to international level. Okay. So, Mr. Raju, a leading businessman who is into the business of providing South Indian cuisine to its customers. It has hotels, it has restaurants, outlets all over India. He now wants to venture to US. He wants to open certain premises, certain outlets in US. So he says that, okay, I want to open a premises in New York. I want to open a outlet in New Jersey. I want to open a new outlet in California. I want to open a new outlet in several other parts of US. So I want to do business over there also. And he establishes all other branches of his Sarvana Bhavan in entire US. He is profitable once again over there as well. Because not only the Indians who are staying in the United States, they enjoy and they relish South Indian food, but also the Americans who for a change want some new cuisine, who for a change want something new to be eaten, they enjoy South Indian food as well. And mind you, South Indian food, which is very cheaply available in India, is sold in the United States or for that matter UK in hefty bucks. So I'll give you a example that I have seen practically in my life. Idli, one idli, if you buy it in Kerala, if you buy it in Chennai, if you buy it in Bangalore, you buy it in Odisha, you buy that particular idli in any part of South India, you'll get it for 2 rupees, 3 rupees or 5 rupees per piece. You come to Delhi and you will get one idli for 70 rupees per piece. Yes, 140 rupees per plate. You go to United Kingdom, you will get that idli for 700 rupees per plate. So that is the variability of prices owing to the economy of that particular country, owing to the paying capacity of that particular country, owing to the costs which are involved in creating such a setup in that particular country. We are definitely required to pay more in the country where we live in. So I still remember when I went to London for having a small vacation. At that point in time, I had a dosa, masala dosa, which costed me $1,000. $1,000 for one masala dosa in Sarvana Bhavan. So yes, the prices vary. But the question over here is tax, not price. The tax is to be levied by governments. Now, what will United States of America government tell Mr. Raju? United States of America will tell Mr. Raju, oh Mr. Raju, I know you are an Indian. By heart you are an Indian. You've been grown up in Indian. You've been born and brought up in Indian. All your infrastructure is in India. Your factory where you produce these dosas and their batter and their raw material is put together. That's all in India. Your infrastructure is all in India. You send semi-cooked items to United States, and those semi-cooked items are then converted into fully cooked item, and then they are sold. We know everything. We know your business model day in and day out. But Mr. Raju, tell me, where have you earned the income from? You've earned the income from New Jersey. You've earned the income from New York. You've earned the income from customers in California. So, Mr. Raju, you are required to pay tax for the dosas, idlis, paniyaram, appam, which you have sold in New Jersey, in New York. You have to give your income for selling all those products to the US government. Now, the question is, US government has a different income tax department? Of course, yes. Indian government has a different income tax department. US government has a different income tax department. Absolutely. So what will US government say? US government will say, Mr. Raju, please pay your taxes in the United States of America for all the products, for all the services that you've rendered in the United States of America. Now, here, the Indian tax government will intervene. Now, you please tell me, what will the Indian government say? What will the Indian government tell Mr. Raju? Indian government will tell Mr. Raju, you are a resident of India. All your basic setup, your company, your establishment, your house, your raw material producing capacity, your machinery, your plant, everything is situated in India. So, the taxing right for your profits of even the sales which are made in US, please mind these words. For even the sales which are made in US, even if you have sold those products in US, those sales will also be taxable in India. Because you are a resident of India. There'll be a tussle, there'll be a fight between the Indian government and US government to collect taxes from Mr. Raju owing to the income which he has earned in United States of America. USA government will say, oh no, you will have to pay taxes over here because you have sold your products over here. Indian government will say, nothing doing. All the residents, if you are a resident of India, your global income will be taxed in India. Whether you earn from US, whether you earn from Australia, whether you earn from anywhere, your income will be taxed in India. So these are the two rules of income taxation. Rule number one, source-based taxation, which will harp upon the source from where income has been earned. And second is the resident-based taxation, which will harp upon which country are you residing in, which country are you resident of. Resident-based taxation and source-based taxation. These are two forms of taxation which are prevalent in the world today. And governments, according to their suitability, according to their interest, they will choose one of them, whichever will be beneficial to them. So I'll give you another example. Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph, resident of United States of America, a leading businessman having outlets for Subway. Subway are the burgers which contains fresh veggies. They are 1 foot long or 6 inches long burger, which are actually not burger because burgers are round. They are long snacks, and these long snacks has fresh veggies. They have some 7-8 sauces which can be put into the Subway, and he is owner of that joint which is known as Subway, which is prevalent in the United States of America. Now if Joseph tries to establish its outlet in India, Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, UP, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, everywhere it is planning to establish its outlet, again there'll be a fight between Indian government and US government. Now what will US government say? US government say, oh Mr. Joseph, you are resident of United States of America. Okay, now US government will forget about source rule. It will not talk about source rule. It will talk about resident rule now. US government will say, oh Mr. Joseph, you are resident of India. If you are resident of India, you should pay taxes which are which for the products which you are sold in India, you should pay taxes in United States of America for those products also which are sold in India. And what will Indian government say? Indian government will say, nothing doing. If you have earned any income from India, the source of earning that income is in India. If you have earned any income from India, then you should pay taxes in India. Indian government will say this. Now this is known as role reversal. Earlier, Indian government was harping upon the resident rule in case of Mr. Raju. Now, Indian government is harping upon the source rule in case of Mr. Joseph. Similarly, the US government was harping upon the source rule in case of Mr. Raju. US government is harping upon the resident rule in case of Mr. Joseph. They want their share of revenue at the end of the day. They are only thinking about their profits. Everyone thinks about their profits. Everyone in the world is concerned about their revenue, their profits, their interest. So there's no harm in India and US government in thinking about their profits. There's no harm in Indian government applying two different rules in case of two different assessees. There's no harm in US government applying two different rules in case of two different assessees. They are thinking about their interests. They have to safeguard their interest. So it's really, really okay to safeguard interest of India, to safeguard US of United States of America. In this entire process, who is the sufferer? Who is suffering? The person who's suffering is Mr. Raju. Mr. Raju has his hand over his heads like this. He's utterly depressed. He is in a remorse condition. He's sad. He is affected by the two governments of the two states. He is really terrorized by the two governments, and he's saying, now where should I pay taxes? Should I pay taxes in India, or should I pay taxes in US, or should I pay taxes in both the countries? And if I have to pay taxes in both the countries, why should I earn? If I have to pay all my income through taxes, 30% will be levied by Indian government, 30% will be levied by US government. What will remain with me? Ille. Nothing. 40% will remain. So am I working for myself? Am I working for US or Indian government? Whom am I working for? So where should I pay taxes? Raju is under a utter chaos. Raju is under a utter confusion. To resolve this confusion, to resolve this dilemma of double taxation, This is known as the dilemma of double taxation. We have double taxation avoidance agreements. So, what is international taxation? What is international taxation? What is international taxation? International taxation is nothing but avoiding double taxation. It is not a different law. I mean, it is a different law, but it does not deal with taxation. It deals with situation where taxes is levied in two countries. I'll give you an example. PGBP is being earned by Mr. Raju. PGBP is earned by Mr. Raju in US. In United States of America, there'll be an income tax law. In that income tax law, there will be rules to tax PGBP. In Income Tax Act, there will be rules to tax PGBP. In DTAA, between India and US, there will not be rules how to tax PGBP, but there will be rule how to avoid double taxation where PGBP income is being taxed both in the United States of America and India. Repeat. I know it's complicated and you'll take some time to digest this thing because this is the first time, guys. I understand that this is the first time you are studying international law and international taxation is new to you. Undoubtedly, it is not easy. In the country, there are very few professionals who actually know international taxation. You know, you can count on your fingers how many professionals are there who truly know international taxation. It's a difficult area, it's a niche area, and it's complicated. So don't worry. Repeat again and again, revise this video again and again, and you will be able to understand the gist of what I'm saying. So let me repeat. US Income Tax Act will contain the provisions on how to tax PGBP in United States of America. Indian Income Tax Act will contain the provisions of how to tax PGBP in India. DTAA between India and US will not contain provisions on how to tax PGBP. No. It will contain the provisions on how to avoid double taxation when PGBP is being taxed in both the US and India. What will DTAA say? DTAA will say that India and US, Mr. Raju is a resident of India. So dear US government, you please don't levy the PGBP tax on Mr. Raju since he is a resident of India. DTAA will say this. Or DTAA will say, dear India, Mr. Raju is a resident of India, we agree with that, but the source of this particular income is United States of America. So India, you do not charge tax on the PGBP income which is earned by Mr. Raju in United States of America. Let the US government levy tax on that. This is how the dispute between the India and US government will be resolved by DTAA. Sir, how are DTAAs formed? How are DTAAs created? Guys, representatives from India, representatives of US both sit together and agree upon a DTAA. So it's a mutual agreement that, you know, at some places United States of America will step down and say, okay, these incomes we won't tax in our country, you tax in your country. At some places, Indian government will step down and say, okay, these incomes you tax in your country, we will not tax in our country. Now the question is, what are those transactions which will be eligible to this manifestation, this this arbitration which is done by DTAA? What transactions will be eligible for this particular concept of international taxation and double taxation avoidance agreement? Only those transactions which involve two countries. Only those transactions. So if I have a transaction between two states within India, so Delhi, I am producing dosa, selling in Haryana, then would DTAA apply? No, DTAA will not apply. DTAA will apply on those transactions or those dealings where two countries are involved. Because Only when two income tax acts are involved, there's a question of double taxation. And if there's a question of double taxation, then comes the provision of double taxation avoidance agreement. So international taxation is all about dealing with the double taxation, avoidance of double taxation in case of areas where a transaction is taxed both in two sovereign countries. This is known as double taxation. This is known as international taxation. This is how international taxation is important to us. Now the question is, sir, what do you mean by international transaction? I've just explained what do you mean by international transaction. So what is transaction? First of all, transaction is any dealing, any sort of relationship which has been developed by two people for the motive of earning profit. It is a commercial transaction, okay? It is not out of love and affection that a transaction has arisen. It is a commercial transaction, purely a commercial transaction, and a commercial pursuit, a commercial dealing is known as a transaction. Now, what is international transaction? International transaction is that transaction where the dealing, the commercial pursuit is between individuals of two different countries, or two different countries are involved. One individual is there, but two different countries are involved in that particular transaction. The transaction arises in one country and concludes in another country, or arises in another country and concludes in one country. So for example, I am a shoe manufacturer of India. My shoes are sold globally. So my shoes are manufactured in India and they are sold in Singapore, they are sold in Malaysia, they are sold in UK, they are sold in Australia. Each of the countries my shoes are sold. So the transaction arises in India but gets concluded in a country which is outside India. Or the transaction which arises outside India but gets concluded in India. Soon as this cross-border transaction happens, there will be involvement of two income tax authorities. Whenever there will be involvement of two different income tax authorities, there has to be some international taxation, there has to be some arbitration, there has to be some involvement, some agreement that can avoid double taxation on this particular transaction. So this is known as international transaction.